You okay? Hi everybody, can you hear me all right? Yeah. I perhaps rashly said no to a lapel mic, so just wave if you can't hear. As Joanne said, I'm Fran. I run the journalism department at Liverpool John Moores University, where we have 4 NCTJ accredited journalism courses. We do quite a lot of work on EDI in our department, although I would stress that we, like I suspect many of us, have got a long way to go and wouldn't at all put ourselves forward as having all the answers, and I'm here to find out from our excellent panellists and everybody else what more we can be doing. If you will forgive me a quick plug, I'm going to immediately exploit the fact that I'm sitting here. We are organising a one-day symposium in June next year about how you embed EDI in the teaching of journalism, and so if any of the educators here are keen to be involved in that, or indeed industry, either to attend or perhaps even to be on a panel or suggest a paper, please grab me or my lovely colleague Polly, who's in the stripy red and white top there at some point today. Sorry about that, but I couldn't resist the captive audience. More importantly, we've got 3 fantastic panellists with us here today for what promises to be a really interesting and insightful, I think, conversation about neurodiversity in journalism. I know that I'm really keen to learn more about what it means to be neurodiverse in our industry and how we might best support and nurture that talent for the benefit of everybody. And so if I could, I'll just quickly introduce the panellists, and then hopefully you won't hear too much more from me. I'll ask some questions, they'll give you their excellent answers, and then there should be some time for you lot to ask questions as well at the end. Okay, so we've got starting on your left, Ed Hardy, who is a writer at the Motorsport Network, a post he's held just for a couple of months so far after completing his sports journalism course at News Associates Manchester earlier this year, so he's done brilliantly well. And he was the 2022-3 recipient of the Thomas Reid Bursary. Jessie is the money and business editor of I and the author of Autism, How to Raise a Happy Autistic Child. She was formerly the deputy money editor of The Times and The Sunday Times and has managed several neurodivergent reporters in her career so far. And Michael Pearson is the social media lead for BBC Radio 4, based right here, I think, and has been a Journalism Diversity Fund mentor. He formerly worked for Reach, including on my home turf at the Liverpool Echo. So we'll start with Ed. And Ed, would you mind kicking off by telling us a little bit about the ways in which you are neurodivergent and how, if at all, that affects your day job?
Yeah, so I've got quite a lot of conditions actually. So age of 7, I was diagnosed with autism. As I got older, got a lot better at managing it, but when I was younger, it was pretty severe. Couldn't speak till the age of 4. And then I've also got Tourette's, not the verbal one, but the ticking one. So if I ever twitch during this, it's because I've got that. And then it's not neurodiverse, but it's also worth mentioning I'm a type 1 diabetic and have been since 2013. In terms of how it affects me day to day, yeah, so in terms of maybe weaknesses, I'd say, so in the job, for example, if I ever maybe make a little slight error, I'd probably be a bit harder on myself than the usual person. You know, those slight errors people can just forget in an instance. Maybe I'll just beat myself up about it a bit more. And I'm also one to maybe overthink things a tiny bit. But then there's still a lot of positives with it. So as a sport journalist, I'm pretty good at knowing your stats and your facts. My ability to retain knowledge in certain stats, I'm pretty good at, I must say. And then other things, so my organisation skills, challenge anyone in this room to have a more satisfying filing system than I've got. And then, yeah, just other things like, as you need as a journalist, what I'm pretty good at is, I hate to, when you sort of beat around the bush, I like to be pretty direct with the questions that I ask and sort of my writing, so I'd say I'm good at just getting straight to the point rather than just, yeah, leading up to it.
Great. Sorry, were you going to...
No, yeah, that's everything.
Okay, we'll be coming back to you, don't worry. Thank you, that's all really interesting. And Michael, can I ask you the same questions? In what ways are you neurodiverse, and how, if at all, that affects your sort of day-to-day work as a journalist?
Yeah, so probably in the opposite to you, and sort of getting to the point, I'm the complete opposite. So I have ADHD, I have dyslexia, and I have dyspraxia. So it was something that I was diagnosed with at a very young age. My mum was a head teacher at a special educational needs school, and I think she sort of noticed from a young age that, you know, that I might need to sort of get hold of these sort of things. So we went and got tested and came back for, I think at the time it was sort of, it wasn't referred to as ADHD, it was more around ADD and things like that, but now they just call it ADHD. And that's basically what I have. Yeah, it can be a struggle sometimes, particularly around sort of, if I don't note things down, place things down, I ramble on. So I do have I've written notes down here, which I do need to do, so because if I don't, I didn't realise there was going to be 3 of my old managers in here, so they'll all be able to attest.
Is your current manager here? That's the important thing.
No, so, but yeah, they'll all be able to attest of sort of meetings that should have been 15 minutes turned into 45 minutes. So, but yeah, and it can be really tough in organisation, but I think now that I've got to the stage of the career that I'm in, you know, I've been sort of working in journalism for, 11 years now, and when I left Reach was in sort of more of a management position, and when going into a management position, I noticed that there were differences, and I needed to work on things about being organised and things like that. And actually Ed, who's my boss, I didn't know Ed was going to be here today, and I actually wrote in my notes about, remember having a distinct one-to-one that I had with Ed, where we sort of sat down and said, and Ed said, this is how I do things, and this is how I write on my day-to-day. I plan everything out, I write those notes in and say, this is what's important for me today, this is what I really need to work and focus on today. This other stuff's also important, but I don't actually need to work on that right now, and I don't need to work on that today. And I still use that every day today, and just little things like that have been able to help and improve what I do.
Great. And are there any particular strengths that you think that you bring to your job as a result of being a neurodivergent person?
I think so. I think like you can sort of realise that when you sort of speak to other people that actually you can't always use the same brush with people that you speak to. I think like something that I've always found, and particularly when I've been in management positions and managing sort of groups of people and younger journalists as well, is that, you know, everyone has their own specific set of needs, and you know, we all do, and being able to sort of look at that perspective and say, actually, something that might work for one of the people that I might be managing might not work for another person, and actually we want to be working in a way that can be more tailored to people, and that really helps from a neurodiverse perspective, I think.
Interesting. And can I ask, are your colleagues widely aware that you're neurodiverse? And do you have any advice to young journalists who might be just starting out about talking about their neurodiversity in the workplace with managers and colleagues?
Yeah, so now, because for those that are aware, I've just come into this role at the BBC after working at Reach for about 7.5 years, and it was something that I wanted to be quite clear about from the offset, and not in terms of saying, look, I have ADHD, look at me type thing, but actually just, I'd gone from working with people and surroundings that had known me for quite a long time and going into a new place. And a big organisation like the BBC, I think it can be extremely daunting. The Reach was also another huge company, and that it was really daunting when working up the way through that company when I was there. And I think when I first started out in journalism, it was something that I never talked about. It was something that I would never say to someone about oh, I have ADHD, or I definitely talked about. It was easier to talk about dyslexia, because you'd realise that you couldn't say there or there without getting a mistake in what you were writing. So that was something that I definitely was always sort of quite clear about. But I'm definitely more open about it now, and I felt like I was able to do that when I moved into more of a management position, because I think that if the mistakes were going to be made, it was going to be more noticeable there. Mm-hmm. So But did you say about sort
I'm just wondering, and I suppose this is a question for Ed as well, if you have thoughts about, there may be young journalists or trainee journalists who are just starting out in the room today who are neurodivergent themselves, and if you had any sort of reflections or advice on how you approach raising that in the workplace? Ed, I don't know if you want to...
To be honest, I'm still trying to work out the best way to do that myself.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of for employers, and I think that what works for me might work different for someone else, but in terms of employers, I think a good thing for them, what works for me is treating me just like anyone else. Expecting the same from me as someone else, but always making sure that the neurodiverse person knows that you're there for support if any help is needed. I mean, part of the Thomas Reid bursary, I did a placement at Sky Sports, and what was so great about the people at Sky was, even though they expected the same of me, treating me like any other person wasn't, yeah, I've got autism, but it doesn't really matter. I still knew that there was always that support there if I needed the help. And I think that's what works for me in terms of employees, but in terms of, the young people in this room who are neurodiverse, to be honest, I'm still trying to work out what's best for me to tell my bosses, because people I work for now, I'm not too sure if they know even, so, yeah.
And I think like it can take a while to iron those processes out. Like particularly when I look back at it, when I look back at my trainee career, I started on the Northumberland Gazette, which is a weekly newspaper up in Northumberland, where I'm originally from. And I had a real. It was back in the days where this feels so random because it was only about 11 years ago. We would upload all the digital content on a Thursday to the website, and that'd be taking care of digital for the week. So that was literally how we would put all of the stuff from the paper and schedule it up throughout the week. But basically, when I started there, I think I had like this conception that, I'd just done my journalism training. I knew I'd be able to do everything. And I just thought, I'd be able to sort of walk into this job and it'd be, I'd know exactly what I was doing. And like, that couldn't be further from the truth. And I feel like that's the same for whether you're neurodiverse or not. You get a real shock in that journalism. And like, I think that's still true today. And I think for me, what I did was I had to find a way that I could make it work for me, and I think that's the same for anyone with any neurodiverse issues. So for me, what it was every time I made a grammatical mistake or something like that, my editor would come with a sort of a yellow sticky note. And he would come and put the yellow sticky note on my computer screen. And then as we went along, we worked together. And I think by the end of my first year in journalism, my computer screen just had like it was like a big sort of sticky eyelash that had Post-it notes all the way around the screen. But actually that became a really good visual reminder for me. So when my brain was sort of saying, is it police force is or police force are, that was one of the things I used to stumble over. I'd be able to visually go to that point I think I still remember it was like the left side of the screen, and there was that sticky note that would tell me the difference. So being able to work through things like that was really important for me. And I feel like that, like that doesn't come overnight. No. It's a long process, and I think that can be harder now as well, because a lot of when I sort of went into sort of one of my first managerial type roles at Reach was when we were launching a few new websites, and basically we had a lot of trainee reporters that were working with us. And I remember myself and one of the other content editors that we were working on the project with, we sort of said, oh, it's so hard to give the notes back to the reporters around copy and things like that. Yeah. So we tried to make the time to be able to go through and do things like, I think something which I know Marie has done, I can't see her, but who's done at the Echo and things like that, and other titles that I worked at for Reach, they did things like copy clinics and things like that. So I know that if there was times to come and have a look at people's copy and change things around, that was so useful.
Yeah.
So things like that can make such a massive difference.
So that making time in the busy
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
of newsroom to
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Thank you. And Jessie, if I can come to you now, you that very patiently. As somebody who's managed neurodivergent reporters, we've heard a bit from sort of Michael's perspective on that. But as a manager, how do you go about accommodating people who might have particular needs within the newsroom? And as a kind of senior journalist who has managed people, are there any distinct advantages to having neurodiversity within your team?
So in terms of supporting people, I think as a manager, it's being completely clear about what it is you want, and like really scrutinize how clear your instructions are. And I think also as a neurodiverse employee, like perhaps not shying away from saying, actually, please be really clear when you're telling me what to do. I can handle very direct instructions. What I really struggle with is vagueness. So and also I think obviously, Ed, you're smashing this, but the help with organization I often find. So typically people with ADHD and some autistic people might struggle with the organization side of things. So I've been sitting next to people saying, okay, show me your list of stories that you're working on. How are you organizing this? And generally there's a notebook full of like notes being torn out and sort of getting it onto some kind of Word document or coming up with a system with them. And I think also, as Ed was saying, maybe having someone in the company who you can go to that you feel understands yours, has the time to listen and be that sort of trusted person. And it maybe help sort of explaining the sort of unwritten rules of neurotypical life that are so baffling and so like don't make sense and illogical to neurodiverse people. And being flexible, I think, and also perhaps, thinking in someone's communication style, are they really being defiant, which I think is sometimes what managers perceive, or is it just confusion, anxiety, or just a more direct sort of way of expressing things. And I mean, this is a generalization, and obviously generalizations are often untrue, but I do find sometimes that autistic employees, or maybe those with ADHD, want to understand the why and the logic for doing something. So if you're busy and you're just saying, oh, just do this, sometimes I've found quite pushback, and I'm finding it a bit irritating because I don't have time. But then actually I realize it's actually just they need to understand why they're doing something before they can buy into doing that task. And often having that conversation can be quite fruitful as a boss too. And maybe if there's going to be a change, giving plenty of notice, which is not always possible, but also being aware if you're throwing a change on someone, that may be quite difficult for that person and sort of provoke anxiety, really. And in terms of the benefits, I think, as Ed was saying, just the ability to totally own your patch is something that is a key benefit, to really spot a new story because you know everything about that subject. And also, if you've got like that kind of, let's say, subject nerdery, you then can make really good contacts with other people that are also, really knowledgeable about that subject. And potentially less groupthink, maybe someone is actually saying, well, why do we always do it this way? Doesn't really make sense. That can be really helpful. And also, we rely on data a lot more, don't we, to spot what stories people are actually reading. Are they getting to the end of the stories? And I think, maybe some neurodivergent employees might be better at spotting patterns in that data at an earlier point.
Really, really interesting. Thank you. Lots of very sort of tangible advice for newsroom managers in the room, I think. And what you said about the unwritten rules, I think, of the newsroom, I think that's so interesting because I think even for people who are not neurodivergent, anyone who's worked in a newsroom will know that there is so much that's kind of, there's particular lingo or there's norms and there's ways of doing things that is just kind of assumed knowledge. And when you're new and, we used to talk about things, going off stone and that kind of stuff, long after things did ever go off stone. But, that kind of, the language and the ways of doing things and just explaining what we actually mean by that is maybe an inclusivity point
Yeah.
beyond neurodiversity.
Yeah,
Really
absolutely, and people don't often take that time. And I also think, like, maybe if you're neurodivergent, to be aware that the politics of any kind of workplace are hard to fathom, and that they are also hard if you're not autistic. And that's not to say it's not far harder for neurodivergent people, it absolutely is. But I also think sometimes people, you know, you can fantasize that people who aren't autistic sail through these
Everybody else is
interactions,
absolutely fine,
but
yeah.
sometimes, you know, we're also having sleepless nights over one thing we said that we regretted.
Yeah. Thank you. Ed, I'm going to come back to you if that's all right. So you've really recently completed your NCTJ diploma, and I should say congratulations on a gold standard, which is, you know,
Never
that's
know.
hats off to anybody who gets that. Are there any particular parts of the course that you particularly enjoyed or found particularly challenging? And do you have advice for our JDF fellows here who are just sort of beginning that process?
Yeah, so I did a new associates in Manchester, and to be honest, I enjoyed pretty much all of it, I won't lie. In terms of good and bad things of the course, to be honest, I'd say a lot of it came quite naturally, you know, the storytelling, the writing, the spotting the news line, but as someone with autism growing up, two things I struggled with a lot were writing with a pen at speed. I was one of those kids who started on a laptop in school about age 12, and learning a new language, which turns out to be the two things you need to learn shorthand. So at first I was really struggled with it, but just made sure to work hard at it every night and get 100 words a minute. And then advice for, so the thing I went into the course with right in my mind was, it is what you make of it. If you don't put in the effort, then you'll get what you deserve. Whereas if you do put in the effort and go the extra mile to make sure you do everything you can do, then you will get the gold standard, you will get the job, you will do everything you set out to do. And I also think it's important to make sure that those doing the NCJ, it's probably your last chance. It's the last time you're ever going to have without that pressure of full-time employment, so make sure you enjoy it as well away from the course. So I was really close with my course mates and my tutors, and sometimes we might go for a drink after lessons, so you're enjoying their company in a non-work environment as well. So make sure in 10 years' time, whatever, you can look back on the course and think, not only did I enjoy it work-wise, but I also enjoyed it away from the course. Because, yeah, just enjoy the time, really. And next summer, when it comes down to the job hunting, I mean, it took me a bit longer than I hoped. So I finished the course end of May, got offered a job end of September, start of October, something like that.
I'd say that's pretty good going.
I thought it would come quicker. The important thing is, which I didn't do, is if the job hunting process is a bit long, don't get your head down. Don't start thinking, oh, when's this going to end? All that stuff, because that's sort of what I did. Because as long as you just keep at it, keep sending the applications off, keep working hard, building your CV, then something will eventually fall your way, and it'll be like that unemployment stage never happened. So as long, just the course, it is what you make of it. Make sure to enjoy the time away from the work environment as well, and when it comes down to job hunting, just keep working hard. Don't get frustrated, because something will eventually fall your way. Yeah.
Thank you. And Michael, you've been out of journalism education for a little over a decade now, I think. But thinking back, are there things that your tutors could have done differently or added that would have helped create a sort of neuro-inclusive place in which to study journalism?
Yeah, I think there probably wasn't the guidance and support, like everything Ed just said there, like I completely nod in my head agreeing with, because it's like you were putting a lot of pressure under yourself, and like particularly with the shorthand, like I really struggled around shorthand because obviously I had with my dyspraxia with the coordination, and then the dyslexia of the not getting through both sides of that was really tough. And I think I only got to about 60 or 70, sorry. Didn't get to 100.
Than a lot of people manage.
But that was a real tough one. And I think as well, back then, a lot of my accommodations for around some of my neurodiverse things was that it was, you can go and work on a computer. So like just basically got sent to go and work on when I went and sat like exams and things like that, just went and sat and worked on a computer. So it just sort of felt like there was like instead of just looking at your condition, looking at that, instead of looking at it was just like, you just go and do that on a computer. And it was just like that's the solution. So that was really tough. But I'm sure like a lot of places now, have moved on from that stage, and yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Jessie, if we're going to get sort of talent, Ed's smashing it and is in industry, or quite quickly out of his course, but if we're going to get neurodiverse talent into industry, and I think everybody's agreed that would be of a benefit to everybody, then the recruitment process has to be neuro-inclusive as well. And would you say that that's your experience, having recruited a number of staff over your career so far? And if not, what might employers do differently when they're looking to hire to make sure that everybody has a fair crack of the whip?
Yeah, I mean, I've never personally been through a recruitment process where someone's disclosed it from the outset. So I think, it is brilliant that we're so much more aware of these things, but it's really, really recent. And yeah, so it's been sort of disclosed later, but my big feeling is it's the interview process that needs to be sort of addressed. Certainly if you're autistic, I'm guessing the interview process weeds out, like, I don't know how many autistic people, but it's going to be a fair old chunk of autistic people that just aren't going to sort of find it either easy or show what they're capable of. So one way of getting around that is to, offer questions sooner. So say these are the questions I'm going to be asking you in the interview tomorrow for people to prepare. And also sort of, our assumptions about lack of eye contact, or, again, sort of responses if they're a bit more direct than usual, sort of how we sort of deal with them. But I think also, for people going through that process, I think one of the main sort of things that people worry about in the process is not only the disability and whatever prejudices they may or may not have about that, but it's like, is this person going to mean I'm going to have to spend much more time managing them? So it's the worry that it's going to be loads of faff, loads of time. And so I think maybe if addressing that in the interview, you could say, I'm autistic, this is what it means, and these are the accommodations I need. So to sort of come doing the thinking and really thinking it through, like, this is, it's hard to know in a new job exactly how it's going to apply. But I think if you're able to sort of show that you're able to negotiate that kind of situation, then that's very helpful. And the reality is lots of places are lovely and inclusive and enlightened, but not everyone is. So I think you have to weigh up, do you want to disclose? And if you don't disclose, are you going to be in an environment that actually is not going to be flexible enough for you?
Really interesting, thank you. Final one from me, and then I think we'll open it out to the group, and it's just to come to Michael, because I know that you fairly recently changed jobs and therefore been through a recruitment process, and sort of from the other side of that coin, do you have any reflections on the recruitment process and making sure that there are sort of routes in?
Yeah, so it was interesting, everything you were saying about disclosing and sort of chatting, that was something that I thought through, and it was something I'd never had to think about for sort of 7-8 years, because when I was working with Reach, there was fortunate interviews that I'd had with people that I more generally knew and were able to sort of go through the company together. So when I left Reach and I had the interview for the BBC, I made the decision to say, when they ask and you see that, there are any accommodations that you need, and I was, sort of thought that was more applicable to things like physical disabilities. So, but actually, I thought, actually, do you know what? I'm just going to say, just about my ADHD, because I was getting very stressed about the interview, and I said, this is something that I just want to flag. And then they came back, the recruitment person from the BBC came back and said, and what we'll do is we'll get you to have a chat with the hiring manager. And I was like, oh goodness, this is perfect. And they're like, you can ask for this. You can ask for a chat with the hiring manager before the interview. And it was like, actually, I never thought of this. I never thought about doing anything like this. And so I had this chat with the hiring manager, who's now my boss, and it was just so amazing and so brilliant, because I was able to just spend a couple of minutes just saying, you know, if I run over, if you know, because a lot of the interview was set around 10 minutes for this, 5 minutes for this, for this, and I said this is going to be a real, you know, like a real, you know, even if I'm following a script and even if I'm keeping the letter, I'm still really going to struggle with this. And she was like, you know, that's fine, you know, don't worry about it all, completely put me at ease. And then what you said about the questions, I actually saw someone else who is neurodivergent, and they said, I asked to see the questions before my interview, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made, because it just completely put me at ease. So I asked before, and they didn't give all the questions away, because they said they wanted to be, obviously you want to be fair for all the people that you're interviewing, but actually they sort of said, around these topics, think about this, come and think about this, you know, and there was a big section around like the values of the BBC as well, and having a look around things like that, and I was like, oh, actually, no, I wouldn't have even thought about that, and it was so fantastic. So when I had my interview, I felt so much more at ease, so much more simple, and then I just thought, you know, that was such a positive experience that it just gave me the confidence to then take that into my new role. So in my new role, I sort of, you know, people who I work with quite regularly on the basis, I just sort of just like, you know, if this meeting goes over, just that might be why. And then also I saw someone else who worked at the BBC, they put on their signature at the bottom of their email that said that about them having dyslexia, and I thought, you know, that's such a good idea, so I've put that on mine now. But it is great, because if I look at my job now, you know, I've basically been given the keys to the social media accounts for the second largest radio station in the UK. It's a little plug there. And then, you know, being able to do that, and also to have, you know, dyslexia and dyspraxia, things like that, which would affect grammar and spelling and things like that. It's actually just great that I've been able to do it. And what I have worked really closely with my boss to just make sure that those procedures are in place. So, you know, like you know, things like Grammarly saves my life and things like this. You know, these little things that work for you. And we work in a document where any of the text goes through a document first, so you see it in a document, and physically seeing that in a working document before you then lay that out on an actual live social thing, it can just help pick up those things and mitigate. So it was just, yeah, really positive for me.
Really interesting, thank you. And I'm conscious actually that we haven't really touched on the growing range of sort of tech tools that might actually be able to help, I mean, everybody but neurodivergent people in the workplace. But I'm just going to leave that hanging, because I've been given that, you know, we don't have long left, and I do want to make sure that people in the audience have the opportunity to ask questions. There are microphones, I believe, so if you've got a question, if you could stick your hand up, and then we'll come to you.
Just one more thing. I was thinking in the interview it'd be really helpful for HR people to send a picture of where the interview is going to happen, and really explain out what is going to be entailed in the interview.
That's really interesting, thank you. Okay, so we've got a question over here. Please could you just give us your name and who you work for, and then fire away?
Hello, Sani Rudrafajula, JDF alumnus and freelancer for BBC and Sky Sports and 100 other places, still looking for work. Just something kind of Jessie mentioned there about, you know, weeding out, you know, potentially a lot of neurodiverse candidates, and then Michael, you kind of said you had to go and tell the BBC recruiters what you wanted. It still kind of feels like the onus is very much on the person kind of outing themselves, for want of a better term. And from my understanding of a BBC board, having tactically avoided them so far, it's very much a case of on the day in your performance. So, you know, it almost feels like, you know, the iceberg, all that stuff underneath is therefore being ignored, and all your skills and talents can easily just be lost. I don't know what your reflections are on that.
My personal feeling is that is where we are now, but it's not going to be where we are in 5-10 years, because I think, you know...
That seems like a very long wait, though, 5-10 years.
It does. But, I mean, I think employers can support people properly at the moment, but they're going to have to fairly soon, because I imagine we're going to see neurodivergent people getting more vocal and perhaps getting a bit more legal with employers. So I can't say when that process is going to be, you know, companies are going to have to start focusing on it more, but I can feel it's beginning.
And it definitely feels like it's a learning thing for everyone you know, I definitely feel like this has been a real learning process for my boss as well, and I definitely feel like they've got to work for it, and it can be. As I said, I wouldn't have done it. I think when I was starting out in my career, I probably wouldn't have mentioned it straight away, probably wouldn't have said anything. But I think there is a real positive to it, and it's not a positive to say, look at me, I've got ADHD, that rhymes. But actually just being able to just have that confidence to say, I have this condition, it may affect some of the bits, but actually in a way it could actually help. It could help on a wider scale of having this more broader and diverse range of people that you have, and I think we still have to be able to get them to see that, and hopefully events like this will really help, where there are people that are sitting there saying, you know, it is okay to ask these questions, it is okay to ask for accommodations, it is absolutely fine, and I think that you know, that we are training and we are journalists, so actually being a bit more upfront with those questions is actually a really good thing to be, and we're all human, really. So I think we just need to keep pushing in that direction while there is that gap around changes. But
yeah, I mean, it is very much about open communication and whether you're able to do that. But I would say, you know, we are, you know, that open communication is very difficult for a lot of sort of neurodivergent people, but you know, some of the charities working in that area can support people to be able to learn how to have those conversations.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Oh, lots of us. So got a lady here and also one at the front room. Maybe we could take the two together, because I think we're quite short on time.
I'll be really brief. Hello, Carol Watson from Sunderland Uni. I'm glad to hear you went out drinking with your course mates. One issue that we've had previously, obviously not disclosing anything, is we can't disclose to other students any students' kind of declared conditions. How do you think we could help course mates make sure they include people who may be neurodivergent? Because it's great that you had a great experience, but we found some students feel isolated, and I think that's a big part of being at uni, isn't it? Feeling like you're a great cohort together.
Great question. Could we just maybe take a question from this lady here as well, and then we'll ask the panel to answer both of them, because I think that might be then us done in terms of time.
Hello, my name's Lucy Rowan. I'm a JDF recipient at News Associates in London, doing the part-time course, fellow ADHDer. Hi. I'm just wondering, the main thing I kind of struggle with my neurodiversity is having those feelings of like imposter syndrome, and just wondering how you kind of counter that or challenge that in the workplace.
Okay. Another great question. Thank you. So we've got, how do we help other students be inclusive of their neurodivergent peers, sometimes perhaps even without even knowing officially that they are? And then secondly, how do you tackle imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, because like I said before, what worked for me might not work for someone else. I guess I was looking at the end of the day. The thing that I found was really good about where I did my training was how open of an environment it was. It was quite a small office. We were all speaking to each other every day. It was a very open environment where we sort of had no choice but to speak to one another. And I think that environment was maybe set by the tutors themselves, because they were, instead of looking at us as trainees, they actually looked at us as one of their colleagues. So the tutors would speak to us like they would anyone else. They'd create that open environment, just that ability to speak to one another like normal, and it then has a positive impact on the trainees, who then are able to just be open with each other. So I'd say that was set from the tutors, just creating that open environment, that tight-knit group, and just, yeah, instead of speaking to them like trainees, speak to them as peers and colleagues.
Thank you. And do you want to come in on the imposter syndrome question?
I think like the imposter syndrome is it's not something specific to people who have, you know, neurodivergent conditions. It's for everyone. Like when I took on this job, I literally had no idea how I did it. I'd applied for so many jobs at the BBC, like throughout my whole life, you know, from when I was a trainee, etc., and never got seen for an interview, and then just randomly got for this, and it was just, I think those feelings like never go away, but like I just think you sometimes have to. I think sometimes I was listening to a podcast and they were saying actually sometimes you just need to check yourself and say, no, actually I am here, I am doing this, and sometimes it's good to give you, particularly if you're someone who's neurodivergent and now works well with lists, is actually listing back what you've done, and something I do from a more practical journalism perspective is everything that I do is I work through analytics. So I always have a look at, and this is something that anyone could do, you could look through the sort of the analytics that you do around stories that you make, you know, how many page views they got, things like that, how, you know, the big metrics for us are around engagement and video views. So, you know, I think I was really sort of thinking, what am I doing? But that it got to October, and we were doing, we increased our video views by 1.5 million in a month, and I was like, okay, maybe I do know what I'm doing, and it wasn't just me, it was lots of other people, but those things and checking yourself and going, actually no, that's okay, and I think that's one of the ways that I've always tried to get around my personal imposter syndrome.
That's a very positive way to end the session, which is just as well because we are out of time. If we could just all show our appreciation to the panel, that would be great. Really interesting. And back to Joanne.